A young woman is shot dead in the woods. Her ex-boyfriend is the prime suspect. Her distraught father insists he is the killer, but then DNA test results leave everyone stunned. The child she left behind is neither her ex-boyfriend's nor the man the town suspects. So who is the real father? Could this secret be the reason she was murdered? The film's story takes place in a small town called Easttown in Pennsylvania, once one of the most industrially developed areas. However, with societal changes and the rise of new industries, Easttown, which had thrived on traditional industries, begins to decline. Unemployment remains high, leading to a yearly increase in crime. Theft, fights, and drug use are rampant. The Easttown Police Department, once a rather quiet place, has become the busiest in town. Mare is a veteran detective at the Easttown Police Department, highly trusted by the local residents. Because most of the townspeople know each other, some even related, they often call Mare directly on her personal phone for help with minor civil disputes instead of the police. The heavy daily workload, coupled with the constant harassment from the public, has left Mare, in her 40s, utterly exhausted. Furthermore, the case of a missing teenage girl from a year ago has added to her torment. The missing girl is a 17 or 18-year-old named Katie, the daughter of Bailey, Mare's former classmate. For the past year, Mare has tried everything but has been unable to find Katie's whereabouts. Meanwhile, Bailey was battling cancer and didn't have long to live to see her daughter again before she passed away. She constantly pressured the police and Mare through public opinion. This pressure was almost suffocating Mare. Not only was her work fraught with difficulties, but Mare's personal life was also in turmoil. Despite being only in her early 40s, she was already a grandmother to a 6-year-old boy. 6 years ago, Mare's son, Kevin, and his girlfriend, Carrie, had a child out of wedlock. Shortly after, both young people fell into drug addiction. 2 years ago, Kevin, unable to bear the withdrawal symptoms, hanged himself at home. Carrie was then admitted to a compulsory rehabilitation center. Therefore, Mare and her husband Frank had to shoulder the responsibility of raising Drew, who was then only 4 years old. The pain of losing their child also caused a growing distance between Mare and Frank. Finally, they ended their marriage of over 20 years a year ago. Fortunately, Mare's elderly mother and her recently grown-up daughter have always been there to help her care for Drew. Thanks to this, Mare has been able to focus her energy on her increasingly demanding work. However, one day during that summer vacation, while the old missing person case remained unsolved, a serious murder occurred in Easttown. The victim was Erin, a 17-year-old unmarried single mother who was staying home from school to care for her child. When found, Erin was completely naked, lying in a wood near the town. The autopsy revealed that the time of death was between midnight and 2 a.m. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head at close range. In addition to the head wound, Erin's left index finger was also severed. There were also noticeable bruises on her face, indicating that she had been assaulted before death. However, no bullet, personal belongings, clothing, or phone were found at the scene. Despite being stripped naked, Erin was not sexually assaulted. This act by the killer seemed to be intended to humiliate the victim or mislead the police investigation. Having failed to gather any valuable clues at the scene, after taking on the case, Mare decided that the first thing to do was to break the bad news to Erin's father, Kenny. Erin's mother had passed away from a serious illness 2 years prior, leaving the father and daughter to rely on each other. Mare worried that Kenny would struggle to accept Erin's tragic death. Therefore, she called her close friend Lori, asking her husband John and younger brother Billy to accompany her to Kenny's house, as they were related. Mare believed that having family members present might offer some comfort to Kenny. However, reality was different. When Mare broke the news of Erin's death, Kenny immediately became distraught. Fortunately, John and Billy's timely reassurance helped him calm down. After regaining his composure, Kenny bluntly stated that the murderers were Erin's ex-boyfriend, Dylan, and his current girlfriend, Anna. According to Kenny, Erin was usually busy caring for her young child and rarely interacted with outsiders, making it impossible for her to have any enemies. Dylan was Erin's high school classmate. A year ago, when she was 16, Erin became pregnant after secretly having an affair with Dylan. Despite Dylan's strong objections, Erin was pressured to have the child. Since then, Dylan broke up with her and started dating Anna. After Erin gave birth, Kenny, a regular worker, shouldered all the living expenses for the mother and child. He was just an ordinary laborer with an income barely enough to support 3 people. Meanwhile, Erin's son was hearing impaired and needed a large sum of money for surgery. Recently, Erin had been constantly pressuring Dylan to contribute money for her son's treatment. The day before the crime, Erin had an unexpected errand and asked Dylan's parents to look after the child for a few days. When Dylan came to Kenny's house to pick up his son, a heated argument broke out between the two. At that time, Anna was with Dylan and warned Erin not to continue clinging to her boyfriend or she would make her pay. Based on what happened, Kenny suspected that Dylan, unwilling to pay for his daughter's surgery, had conspired with with his girlfriend Anna to murder Aaron. After leaving Kenny's house, Mare immediately summoned Dylan to the police station for questioning. Dylan denied killing Aaron, but provided Mare with a clue. According to his testimony, on the night of the murder, he and Anna had met Aaron in the woods near the town. That woods were a popular nighttime meeting place for many teenagers in the town. That night, Dylan and Anna were with some friends in the woods. During that time, they saw Aaron walk by, but they didn't speak to each other. Around 11:30 at night, Dylan and Anna returned to their rented house to rest. They only heard about Aaron's murder the next day. Although Mare noticed Dylan's evasive behavior during questioning, as if he was hiding something, she could only temporarily let him go because there was no concrete evidence. Due to the extremely serious nature of the case and the fact that Mare was clearly overwhelmed, the Easttown police chief requested assistance from the Pennsylvania State Police and assigned a detective named Colin to help Mare solve the case. Colin was reportedly a young, newly recruited officer, but he had recently solved an extremely complex missing person case, so the chief hoped he could bring a new direction to this investigation. The next morning, Colin reported to the Easttown Police Department on time. At that moment, Easttown police officers discovered a video circulating online involving Aaron. In the video, Aaron was being verbally abused and physically assaulted by Anna, Dylan's girlfriend. Several teenagers, including Dylan, stood watching indifferently. The video was filmed around 10:30 p.m. on the night of the murder, and the location was the woods near the town where Aaron's body was found. Mare unexpectedly realized that her daughter Siobhan also appeared in the video. However, Siobhan wasn't just standing by and watching Aaron being humiliated. She happened to be passing through the forest and intervened in time to stop Anna's actions, saving Aaron from the situation. Mare and Colin immediately summoned Anna to the police station for questioning, but with her defiant personality, Anna refused to answer any questions. Mare was forced to show the video recording of Aaron's humiliation and warned that if Anna didn't cooperate with the investigation, she would be prosecuted for intentional assault. Unexpectedly, Anna became enraged, calling Mare a terrible woman who had driven her son to suicide. Anna's words struck Mare's deepest wound, causing her to almost lose control of her emotions. Colin, who had just arrived and witnessed this scene, was also speechless, not knowing how to handle it. His initial impression of Mare was that of a decisive, neat, and resolute police officer. He never imagined she had experienced the pain of losing a child. Therefore, despite his disapproval of Mare's investigative style, Colin couldn't help but feel sympathy for her, perhaps not wanting to suffer further hurt from harsh words, or perhaps realizing that Anna didn't resemble Aaron's murderer. Mare ultimately didn't pursue the matter and allowed Anna to leave the police station. Returning home after working overtime, Mare asked her daughter Siobhan about what happened the night of the murder. According to Siobhan, after preventing Anna from assaulting Aaron, she tried to take Aaron home, but Aaron refused and left the forest alone. It was still before 11 o'clock at night. When she saw that Aaron had gone far away, Siobhan returned home, and she had no idea what happened afterward. The next morning, Mare and Colin summoned the young men and women who appeared in the video of Aaron being humiliated to the police station for questioning. Based on their testimonies, it was Anna who had lured Aaron to the forest the night of the murder. Anna pretended to be a boy online to chat with Aaron, using sweet words to win her affection. That evening, Anna arranged a meeting and took Aaron to the forest. After meeting, she, along with Dylan and a few friends, publicly humiliated Aaron in front of everyone. One male student even filmed the entire incident and posted it online. After Siobhan rescued Aaron, the group of teenagers split into pairs and dispersed throughout the forest to meet up. Most of them stayed at the scene until around 2 in the morning before leaving. During that time, they did not hear any gunshots or Aaron's cries for help. Furthermore, according to the testimony of another male student, Aaron arrived at the forest on a pink bicycle when she came to meet them, but the police did not find any bicycle at the scene. From this, it can be inferred that if this group of teenagers hadn't colluded to give false testimony, the forest where Aaron's body was found was most likely not the initial crime scene, but merely a place where the killer disposed of the body. Therefore, Anna was even less likely to be the real culprit. Just as the investigation was revealing a small clue, another serious assault occurred in Easttown. It turned out that, seeking revenge for his daughter Kenny, in a drunken rage, forced Dylan to a suburban area to interrogate him about who had killed Aaron. Seeing that Dylan couldn't confess, Kenny, in a fit of rage, shot him in the stomach and fled the scene. The next morning, after sobering up, Kenny realized his grave mistake and voluntarily turned himself in to the police. Fortunately, Dylan, injured, was discovered by passersby and taken to the hospital for emergency treatment, saving Kenny's life and preventing him from facing the additional charge of murder. However, the police still detained him on charges of unintentional injury. That evening, Lori, Mare's close friend, suddenly came to her and revealed a secret. According to her, However, Dylan was not the biological father of Aaron's son. Aaron had a close friend named Jesse during her lifetime, and it was Jesse who told Lori this secret. Although Aaron had never told Jesse who the father of the baby was, Jesse suspected that Frank, Mare's ex-husband, might be the one who impregnated Aaron. Frank was a high school teacher, and Aaron had been his student before dropping out. Not long before, Jesse had seen Frank with Aaron buying baby supplies. Because Frank was Mare's ex-husband, Jesse didn't dare report it directly to the police, instead confiding Aaron's secret to Lori, who was close to her mother. Lori was also Mare's best friend, so Jesse hoped to pass this clue to Mare through her. After hearing the news, Mare angrily confronted Frank. Frank admitted that he had gone with Aaron to buy baby supplies and even helped her pay because he knew Aaron's family was struggling financially. He claimed it was just the concern of a teacher for a former student. However, Frank adamantly insisted that there was no illicit relationship between him and Aaron, and that he could not possibly be the father of the child. If Mare had any doubts, he was willing to cooperate with a paternity test. Mare basically believed Frank wasn't lying, but before leaving, she still took a few strands of his hair. Early the next morning, Mare went back to the hospital to see Dylan, who was there caring for his son. She briefly explained the situation to his parents and requested hair samples from Dylan and Aaron's son for a paternity test. The test results showed that Aaron's son's biological father was neither Dylan nor Frank. Mare had a vague feeling that Aaron's death was very likely related to the man who had impregnated her. The question was, who exactly was that man? Just as Mare and Colin's investigation reached a dead end, other officers from the Easttown Police Department discovered two crucial clues. First, Aaron's call log showed that around 11 o'clock on the night of the murder, she had called a man named John, a church pastor, and that was Aaron's last phone call ever. Secondly, Aaron's phone signal was last detected in a park about 20 kilometers from the forest where the body was found. After that, the signal completely disappeared, either because the phone's battery died or because the killer destroyed it. Therefore, Mare decided to split her investigation into two directions. She sent other officers to the park where the last phone signal was detected to search for clues. Meanwhile, she and Colin went to the church to question Pastor John. According to John, Aaron regularly attended church services, so they were quite familiar with each other. Because she trusted John, after giving birth, Aaron often confided in him about her loneliness and the difficulties of being a single, unmarried mother. On the night of the murder, John did indeed receive a call from Aaron. At that time, Aaron spoke very softly, her voice breathless, and eventually she said nothing at all. John guessed that she must have encountered something difficult to talk about, so he only offered a few words of comfort before ending the call. Mare and Colin were half believing, half doubting this testimony. Because John wasn't a local, they continued investigating his background. The results revealed that John had been transferred Easttown Church 2 years prior from another area. The reason for the transfer was an accusation of harassing young women at his previous workplace. Although the police couldn't find concrete evidence of John's guilt, his reputation was severely damaged. To avoid further gossip, John had voluntarily requested a transfer to Easttown to serve as pastor. From then on, Mare and Colin suspected John might have had a clandestine relationship with Aaron, even suggesting he might have assaulted her, resulting in her pregnancy and childbirth. Mare and Colin planned to return to question John again, but were refused entry at the door. John deliberately closed the door, refused to see the two police officers, and declined to cooperate with the investigation. Reluctantly, Mare and Colin had no choice but to return to the station. Fortunately, in the other line of investigation, the officers sent to the park made a crucial discovery. They found Aaron's severed finger near the park area. Mare and Colin immediately went to the scene. There, Mare discovered a bullet hole in a tree trunk not far from where the severed finger was found, with a bullet still lodged inside. It was highly likely that after the killer shot off Aaron's finger, the bullet hit the tree trunk nearby. This appeared to be the initial crime scene where Aaron was murdered. However, besides the finger and the bullet, Aaron's clothes and the pink bicycle she used on the night of the murder were not found at the scene. So why, after killing her, did the killer strip Aaron of her clothes and dispose of them elsewhere? Even so, if they could determine the type of gun used and trace its origin, they might be able to narrow down the suspects. Just as the investigation was making some progress, Mare encountered another major problem. It turned out that Carrie, Mare's biological mother, had left the rehabilitation center more than 6 months earlier and found a relatively stable job. This made Carrie feel capable of caring for her son, so she asked Mare to return custody. Mare, of course, didn't want her 6-year-old nephew to live with Carrie, but Carrie insisted that she had successfully overcome her addiction a long time ago, and that if Mare didn't relinquish custody, she would sue to regain custody of the child. Because Carrie was the biological mother, if the case went to court to fight for custody, Mare would likely lose. To keep her nephew, Mare devised a flawed plan. She took 2 packages packages of drugs from the police department's evidence room and secretly placed them in Carey's car, then anonymously reported Carey for drug possession. However, this illegal act was quickly discovered by the Easttown police chief. Fortunately, he did not pursue criminal charges but only confiscated Mare's badge and gun and requested that she be temporarily suspended from work pending a review. Mare's nephew was quickly taken in by Carey. With her strong personality, Mare didn't tell her mother and daughter Siobhan about her suspension. She also had no intention of giving up investigating Aaron's case. Mare told Colin the whole truth and asked him to keep her updated on any clues the police gathered. Colin was shocked to learn that Mare had tried to frame someone and was therefore suspended. In his eyes, Mare was a righteous police officer, and he never imagined she could intentionally break the law. Mare finally confessed her true feelings. She was willing to break the law to keep her nephew by her side, not only because she worried that Carey, a former drug addict, wouldn't be able to care for the child properly, but also to make amends for her deceased son. Mare believes that if she hadn't been so preoccupied with work and neglected her son, he wouldn't have gone astray, become addicted, and ultimately committed suicide. After hearing Mare's story, Colin felt even more sympathetic towards her. Finally, he shared a personal secret with Mare. Earlier, we mentioned that Colin was just an inexperienced police officer who had recently solved a complex missing person case, which caught the attention of the Easttown police chief and led to his assignment to assist Mare. However, in reality, the case wasn't entirely Colin's doing. Because the Pennsylvania State Police investigation was at a standstill, the victim's family hired a private investigator to find the missing person. Unexpectedly, this investigator, just as he was about to find a crucial clue, suddenly died of illness. Colin relied solely on the documents left behind by the private investigator to track down the kidnapper and rescue the victim. The Pennsylvania State Police, wanting to save face, concealed the truth and attributed all the credit for solving the case to Colin. In other words, Colin was still just an inexperienced police officer, and his reputation in Pennsylvania was essentially due to benefiting from someone else's success. The reason Colin was willing to tell Mare this secret was to comfort her, assuring her that everyone has their own unavoidable hardships and that she didn't need to continue blaming herself for the past. After revealing his secret, Colin couldn't control his emotions and leaned down to kiss Mare deeply to express his feelings. Through their short time working together, he realized he had fallen in love with Mare. However, Mare rejected his confession. Firstly, because of the significant age difference between them. Secondly, because of her complicated family circumstances. Currently, Mare was completely preoccupied with personal relationships. Seeing Mare's resolute attitude, Colin could only express his understanding through silence. A few days later, another teenage girl went missing in Easttown. This time, the missing girl was named Lucy. Her circumstances were very similar to Katie's disappearance a year earlier. Lucy was also a girl of about 17 or 18 years old. Furthermore, both Lucy and Katie had been drug addicts, and because they needed money to make ends meet, they had both worked as prostitutes. Lucy even registered an account on an illegal website and posted information about her profession. During the investigation into Lucy's disappearance, Colin unexpectedly discovered that Erin's photos and information about her profession were also on that illegal website. It turned out that to raise enough money for her hearing-impaired son's surgery, Erin had secretly resorted to prostitution. From this, Colin developed another hypothesis about the case. It's possible that Erin's death wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a series of crimes. The perpetrator was likely a pervert who targeted prostitutes. A year earlier, he had kidnapped Katie. Not long after, he attempted to kidnap Erin, but met with fierce resistance from her, resulting in Erin's death. After Erin's death, he shifted his target to kidnapping Lucy. Colin then immediately reported all his suspicions and clues to Mare. Mare thought this hypothesis was very plausible. If the killer was indeed a serial killer, had he ever failed in a kidnapping attempt? Thinking this, Mare contacted a pimp she knew, asking if any prostitutes had been nearly kidnapped in the past year. The pimp worked quickly and soon found a girl named Peon. It turned out she had narrowly escaped being kidnapped not long before. Mare and Colin met Peon at a restaurant. According to Peon's account, a few months earlier, late one night while soliciting customers, she encountered a perverted man. He used the excuse of pandemic prevention to trick her into getting into the back seat of his car. Unexpectedly, just as Peon was about to provide her services, the man suddenly tried to strangle her, rendering her unconscious. Luckily, she managed to struggle and jump out of the car to escape. Because of her illegal occupation, Peon didn't dare report it to the police afterward. Furthermore, the dim lighting that night prevented her from clearly seeing the pervert's face, only allowing her to surmise he was a middle-aged white man. However, Peon remembered the type of cigarettes he smoked very clearly because her grandmother often smoked the same brand, so she was very familiar with the smell. In addition, addition, Peon remembered the man driving a blue American-style car, and she also remembered the first 3 letters of the license plate. Based on the information Peon provided, the police quickly narrowed down the suspect to a middle-aged white man named Sager. Mare and Colin immediately went to his house to question him. While talking to Sager, they noticed the volume of the speakers in the house was very loud, making it difficult for Mare to hear him, so she gestured for him to turn the music down. Taking advantage of this, Sager went into the back room and secretly took a gun hidden in his pocket. In fact, he was the one who had kidnapped Katie and Lucy, the 2 girls he was holding captive in a room upstairs. Unexpectedly, Sager didn't have time to tie up Katie and Lucy or gag them. He simply locked them in the room and turned up the music to drown out any noise. Realizing that turning off the music would likely expose his crime, Sager took his gun with him, intending to strike first. Meanwhile, in the living room, Mare and Colin noticed a pack of cigarettes on the table, the same brand Peon had mentioned. When the music suddenly stopped, Katie and Lucy, imprisoned upstairs, immediately became alert. However, unaware of the situation downstairs, they feared Sager would brutally beat them if they cried for help. Therefore, they didn't dare scream, only desperately shaking the heating pipes connecting to the floor below. Mare and Colin immediately noticed the abnormality in the heating system. When Sager returned to the living room, Colin was about to draw his gun to subdue him when Sager was quicker, shooting Colin. Colin couldn't react in time, couldn't dodge, and died instantly. Immediately afterward, Sager continued firing at Mare. She quickly ducked and rushed down the stairs, but her left wrist was still hit by a bullet. Trying to suppress the pain and grief, she ran upstairs and discovered the girls were indeed hidden in the room. However, the door was locked, preventing her from rescuing them immediately. She had to send a message to the police chief requesting reinforcements. While Sager chased her upstairs, she returned downstairs, picked up the gun Colin had dropped, and waited for an opportunity to shoot him if he continued his pursuit. After Sager was shot dead, Mare collapsed onto the floor, overwhelmed with grief at the sight of Colin's body. Soon after, police reinforcements arrived, successfully rescuing Katie and Lucy, who were being held captive, and taking Mare to the hospital for emergency treatment. Although the missing girl's case was solved, the police quickly confirmed that Aaron's death was completely unrelated to Sager. On the night of the murder, Sager happened to be driving to visit his mother elsewhere. Besides Sager's mother's testimony, toll booth staff along the way could also confirm this. A few days later, Mare was discharged from the hospital. Although her gunshot wound hadn't fully healed, the Easttown police chief returned her gun and badge and reinstated her to continue investigating Aaron's murder. Furthermore, the chief provided Mare with 2 new clues. First, the bullet trajectory analysis showed that the bullet that killed Aaron came from an old military-grade firearm, a type not permitted for circulation, making it difficult to trace its origin and identify the perpetrator. Second, Mark, the Easttown church pastor, unable to withstand the psychological pressure, voluntarily came to the police and confessed the whole truth. On the night of the murder, Mark had met Aaron because she had arranged to meet him to cry and recount how Anna had humiliated her. After comforting her for a few moments, he drove her home. Aaron had already put her pink bicycle in the trunk of his car. However, on the way, Aaron unexpectedly received a text message. After reading it, she immediately asked him to drive her to a park about 20 kilometers from the forest, claiming she wanted to meet a very important man. Mark worried that Aaron might be in danger going to meet a man alone in the middle of the night, so he advised her not to go, but she was stubborn and insisted on going. He reluctantly took her to the park and then drove back home alone. The next day, upon learning that Aaron had been shot dead, Mark feared suspicion from the police, so he secretly threw her bicycle, which was still in the trunk of his car, into a deserted lake. The police have now recovered the bicycle based on the location Mark indicated. Although Mark had concealed a crucial clue, he still maintains that he did not kill Aaron. There was no illicit romantic relationship between him and Aaron, and it was impossible for him to be the child's father. The rumors about him harassing young women before being transferred to Easttown were also false. The police conducted a paternity test between Mark and Aaron's son, confirming that he was not the child's biological father. However, it was still unclear whether they had ever had an illicit relationship, nor could the possibility of Mark being the culprit be completely ruled out. Therefore, the chief temporarily detained him only on charges of concealing evidence. After hearing the chief's report, Mare was utterly bewildered. Before Lucy's disappearance, she and Colin had suspected Mark was Aaron's father, but this hypothesis had also been dismissed, so who was the man who impregnated Aaron? Mare then went to Aaron's house and thoroughly searched her room and personal belongings. Finally, she discovered a custom-made gold necklace hidden in a discreet drawer, resembling a token of love. Engraved on the pendant was a series of numbers that looked like a date with special significance. Mare immediately took the necklace to to Kenny, who was being held at the police station. She asked him if he knew the necklace's origin or the meaning of the date engraved on it. After some thought, Kenny recalled a family gathering 2 years prior. That day, besides him and Aaron, there were his cousins John and Billy, their father Pat, John's wife Lori, their 2 children, a boy and a girl, and many others. Kenny's wife had recently passed away, so both he and Aaron were grieving. To help soothe the father and son's spirits, John and Billy organized this family gathering, renting several lakeside cottages where everyone could fish, picnic, drink, and enjoy a relatively pleasant day. The date engraved on Aaron's gold pendant was the date of that family gathering. Could Aaron have met the man who impregnated her on that very day? The problem was, according to Kenny's recollection, Aaron hadn't interacted with any men other than her family members on that day. So why was the date of that gathering engraved on her pendant? Filled with questions, Mare left the police station and went to Lori to ask about it, but Lori barely remembered the gathering from 2 years ago. Mare tried to ask Lori's husband, John, but learned that Lori had kicked him out of the house. It turned out that Lori had noticed her son had been unusually sad lately and had asked him why. Unexpectedly, the boy revealed that his father was having an affair with another woman named Sonia, whom both John and Lori knew. About 5 years prior, John had had an extramarital affair with Sonia. At the time, Lori chose to forgive John, wanting to keep the family intact for the children, and John vowed to cut off his relationship with Sonia. Unexpectedly, 5 years later, the two rekindled their romance, causing Lori to angrily kick John out of the house. Currently, John lives with his father, Pat, and his unmarried younger brother, Billy. However, John will return home the next day to visit the children. Therefore, Lori agrees to help Mare inquire about the family gathering from years ago. After listening to Lori's confession, Mare realizes that the seemingly honest and simple man, John, was not faithful at all. After comforting Lori, Mare left. The next morning, when John returned home to visit the 2 children, Lori passed Mare's question to him. During the interrogation about the family gathering that took place 2 years ago, a look of panic flashed across John's face, but he quickly regained his composure and insisted that he hadn't noticed Aaron interacting with any other men. After visiting his children, John returned to Pat's residence feeling uneasy, only to find him sitting alone, drinking. John noticed his father's troubled emotions and asked what was bothering him. After a moment of silence, Pat slowly recounted a memory that had been tormenting him for a long time. On the night Aaron was murdered, while in the bathroom, he had seen his youngest son, Billy, secretly washing a set of blood-stained clothes. The next morning, he heard that Aaron had been shot dead, but he hadn't told anyone about it. After days of reflection, he became increasingly convinced that Billy was Aaron's killer. After hearing his father's analysis, John immediately called Billy that night, bringing him home from a bar. Throughout the long night, John continuously advised and pressured him. By early the next morning, Billy confessed to his father and brother that he was Aaron's killer. He planned to turn himself in to the police, but before confessing, Billy asked John if he could go fishing with him one more time. Meanwhile, in another line of investigation, after 2 exhausting days, Mare finally found the jewelry store that had sold Aaron's gold necklace. The order records provided by the store owner showed that the person who called to order the necklace had the surname Ross. At this point, Mare suddenly realized she had overlooked 2 extremely important suspects, John and Billy. Previously, Mare had never suspected either of them. Firstly, because John was Lori's husband, Mare was very familiar with him and subconsciously believed he couldn't be the murderer. Secondly, because John and Billy were Kenny's cousins, meaning Aaron's uncles. They were closely related, so Mare never thought that the person who impregnated Aaron and then murdered her could be either of them. However, at that time, Mare hadn't yet determined whether John or Billy had ordered the gold necklace. Based on this suspicion, Mare went to Lori's house to inquire about the situation. Unexpectedly, before she could even speak, Lori proactively revealed the truth. Billy had confessed to John that he was the biological father of the child and also the murderer of Aaron. On the night of the murder, Aaron threatened to expose the incestuous relationship between her and Billy. Fearing his honor would be ruined, Billy, in a moment of situ konji, loss of control, murdered her. At the same time, he decided to turn himself in that same day. At this moment, Billy was fishing by the river with John. Perhaps the two wanted to use their last moments to mend their brotherly relationship. After hearing Lori's story, Mare immediately sensed something was wrong and decided to drive to the riverbank. On the way, she called the police chief to report the situation and request backup. Just as she hung up with Mare, the chief saw Jess, Aaron's best friend, rushing to the police station to provide a crucial clue. According to Jess, she found Aaron's notebook, inside which was a photograph of Aaron intimately lying in bed with a man. Jess suspected this man was the baby's biological father. The chief initially thought the man in the photo would be Billy, as he had just received a report from Mare. But upon closer inspection, he was horrified to realize that the man lying next to to Aaron was John, Billy's brother, and the husband of Lori, Mare's best friend. This meant that John, who appeared so gentle and innocent, not only had an affair with Aaron but was also very likely the baby's biological father. If John was the father, then Mare had clearly mistaken the suspect. Thinking this, the chief quickly called Mare to warn her to be especially wary of John. However, Mare had already gone to the riverside area. Due to a lack of phone signal, she didn't receive the call. While Mare was quietly searching for Billy's whereabouts, John pulled out his hidden gun and silently approached Billy, who was engrossed in fishing, with the intention of shooting him dead. As the police chief had predicted, Billy was neither the father of the child nor the murderer of Aaron. On the night of the murder, John had approached Billy to help him dispose of Aaron's body. The bloodstains on Billy's clothes were from helping John dispose of the body. Billy's confession of murder and decision to turn himself in was also due to John's instigation, who wanted him to take the blame. In John's mind, he had a wife and children to care for, while Billy was single, without any commitments, and living off his father's pension. Therefore, even if Billy went to prison, the family wouldn't be too affected. Unable to resist his brother's pleading and manipulation, Billy finally confessed to the crime in front of his family and agreed to turn himself in. However, John was still not completely at ease, fearing his brother might change his mind. Therefore, he used the excuse of mending their brotherly relationship to lure Billy to a secluded riverside area, intending to kill him to silence him, and then stage a scene to make it appear that Billy, out of fear of punishment, had done something reckless. However, since they were brothers, John hesitated when he drew his gun and couldn't bring himself to fire. At that moment, Billy sensed his brother's murderous intent, and a chill ran down his spine. Just then, Mare appeared and found the two of them. Seeing John holding a gun, even without knowing what was happening, Mare instinctively drew his own gun, pointed it directly at him, and shouted for him to drop his weapon. John, now completely desperate, suddenly turned the gun, intending to do something reckless. Billy, panicked, rushed forward and knocked the gun out of John's hand. Mare seized the opportunity and, together with Billy, subdued John. Afterward, Billy directly pointed out to Mare that John was the real murderer of Aaron. John then frankly confessed to killing Aaron. Mare immediately took John to the police station for questioning. During the subsequent interrogation, John confessed that he had noticed Aaron for some time. At a family gathering 2 years ago, John approached Aaron when they were alone, and they had a relationship that same day. To commemorate this special day, John had a gold necklace custom-made for Aaron, engraving the date they first met on the pendant. Over the next few months, John secretly continued his relationship with Aaron. Eventually, Aaron, still very young, became pregnant unexpectedly. At that time, she had just lost her mother and desperately craved the attention and companionship of family. Therefore, Aaron was determined to keep the baby. Meanwhile, Aaron was dating Dylan and had also been intimate with him. To conceal her relationship with John, Aaron blamed the pregnancy entirely on Dylan. Dylan was completely unaware of the truth. He didn't want to become a father while still in high school, so he chose to break up with Aaron. On the day of the murder, the man Aaron met in the park was of course John. Because Dylan refused to pay for the child's hearing surgery, Aaron was forced to ask John for money. However, John was just an ordinary worker whose earning potential couldn't keep up with his depravity. Even supporting his wife and child was a struggle, so he had no money left to pay for the illegitimate child's treatment. In desperation, Aaron threatened John that if he didn't give her the money, she would expose their relationship. Fearing his family would be destroyed, John flew into a rage and shot Aaron dead. After committing the crime, he called Billy to help him dispose of Aaron's body in a small forest. This was because Aaron had previously had a conflict with Dylan and his new girlfriend, Anna, at that location. John's clear intention was to frame Dylan and Anna for the murder. Stripping Aaron's clothes was merely to mislead the police investigation. After John confessed, due to the extremely serious nature of the crime, the court sentenced him to death. Meanwhile, the church pastor, Mark, who had been detained earlier, was acquitted and released by the police. Knowing he didn't have long to live, John begged his wife to adopt the child he had with Aaron. Since Aaron's father, Kenny, was still in custody for assault, the child was currently being cared for by Dylan's parents. Lori, though utterly devastated by her husband's death, couldn't bring herself to resent him any longer. Finally, she agreed to take the child home and raise him. Later, Lori used Aaron's savings and some of the family's savings to pay for the child's hearing impairment surgery. The case was thus closed, and John finally felt a sense of relief he hadn't experienced in a long time. What made Mare even happier was that Carrie realized she wasn't capable of properly caring for the child and voluntarily relinquished her custody rights, returning her grandson to her. To celebrate her grandson's return, Mare took her mother to a restaurant for a meal. Also present at the gathering were Mare's ex-husband, Frank, and his current fiancée. While in the restroom, Mare unexpectedly encountered Sonia, who had previously had an affair with John. Wanting to avenge Lori, Mare deliberately made an excuse and loudly repeatedly berated Sonia in front of everyone. Unexpectedly, Sonia seemed very confused and told Mare that 5 years ago she had indeed had an affair with John, but since Lori discovered it, they had completely broken off and never seen each other again. Sonia's words baffled Mare because Lori had previously said that her son had told her that John and Sonia had rekindled their relationship. So why was Sonia denying this? With this question in mind, Mare returned to the table, and during their conversation, Frank inadvertently mentioned another important detail. It turned out that the night Aaron was murdered was also the day Frank and his fiancée were holding their engagement party at home. Due to work and family commitments, Mare couldn't attend. According to Frank, John was completely drunk at the party, and Frank didn't take him home until after 1 in the morning. Therefore, when Frank heard that John had shot Aaron, he was extremely surprised, as it was unlikely John would be capable of murder in such a drunken state. However, after hearing that John had confessed, Frank assumed he was faking his drunkenness and didn't think much of it. But Sonia and Frank's words made Mare realize there were still many inconsistencies in the case. Back at the police station, she immediately reviewed the entire video recording of John's interrogation and discovered a series of suspicious points. For example, John claimed that the weapon he used to kill Aaron was a gun he bought for self-defense. But the bullet trajectory analysis showed that the murder weapon was an old military-grade gun, completely impossible to buy on the market. But that wasn't all. John also claimed that after killing Aaron, he was so panicked that he threw the gun away without remembering where he put it. This statement was clearly unconvincing. However, at the time, including Mare and all the other police officers, everyone assumed John was the killer, so no one doubted his testimony. Now thinking back, John's confession was full of flaws. Just as Mare was sinking into doubt, a neighbor named Faber arrived and said that he had a military-grade gun missing 2 bullets from his storage room. This gun was a memento he kept from his time serving in the army. Faber always treasured it, and fearing his young granddaughter might discover it, he usually kept it locked in his family's storage room. Unexpectedly, when he took the gun out to check it today, he discovered that 2 bullets were missing. Mare immediately realized that this gun was the real murder weapon. Under Mare's questioning, Faber revealed that besides himself, Ryan, the boy who often helped him with gardening, also had a key to the shed. Hearing this, Mare quickly checked the surveillance cameras outside Faber's house and discovered that on the night Aaron was murdered, Ryan, then 12 years old and Lori's son, had secretly entered Faber's shed. At this point, Mare finally pieced together the whole truth of the case. The real killer of Aaron was not John, but Ryan. John was merely taking the blame for his son. Although it was incredibly difficult to accept this truth, as a police officer, Mare was forced to take Ryan to the station for questioning. Lori accompanied Ryan. Afterwards, Ryan told Mare that he had been living in a depressed mood lately because he discovered his father's affair with Aaron. Ryan knew his mother would never be able to accept this truth. When Lori realized her son was having emotional problems, Ryan lied, claiming he had discovered his father had reunited with his former lover Sonia 5 years prior in order to prevent his father's relationship with his cousin Aaron from being exposed and causing the family to fall apart. On the night of the murder, while attending a party with his father, Ryan secretly used his father's phone to send Aaron a text message arranging to meet at the park. Then, taking advantage of the fact that John and others were drinking, he stole Faber's military-grade gun and rode his bike to the park to meet Aaron. Initially, Ryan only intended to use the gun to scare Aaron, forcing her to stop bothering his father. However, Aaron treated him like a child and completely ignored him. She even tried to grab the gun. As a result, during the struggle, the gun accidentally discharged, severing one of Aaron's fingers. Immediately afterward, in a panic, Ryan fired a second shot, the bullet striking Aaron directly in the head, killing her instantly. After Aaron's death, Ryan, in a state of extreme panic, called John and recounted the entire incident. At that time, John was drunk and Lori was driving him home. After receiving a call from his son, his drunkenness almost completely subsided. Because he was still dizzy and unable to drive himself, John called Billy, asking him to drive over to help dispose of the body. Ryan took this opportunity to secretly return the gun to Faber's warehouse. Although John participated in disposing of the body, he was completely unaware that the real killer was his own son. He always believed that Billy was the one who killed Aaron. Only when John was arrested did Lori learn the whole truth. At that time, John even said that Billy was willing to take the blame for him and deliberately let Mare know that Billy would confess. Lori, wanting to protect her son, reluctantly complied. The story ends with Ryan being sent to a juvenile reformatory. John, Billy, Kenny, and the others will also face legal punishment for their crimes. The film ends here. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you again.